Welcome to Hood Champion Boxing and Sports. And boxing, you find a way to win or you find a way to lose. Let me make my picture bigger, man. It's Thursday, the weather's nice out here. I'm in the mood to make a video, especially with all crazy Jake Paul being back in the news again. So look, Jake Paul is looking for a return in August. And I'm covering Jake Paul because it's boxing related. Gotta get a man his credit. I'm not saying he's gonna be a world champion, but he's boxing. Doesn't matter who he's fighting, he's boxing. He's now promoting boxing. The biggest payday a female boxer has ever received is as a result of him, his profile, his platform, and just his driven dedication to ensure that happens. So gotta applaud that man. Now the picture that I put on here, you would never think that this guy was someone who had a quality or an attribute that many professional boxers wish they had. And I'm talking about power. At some point, you gotta give him respect for at least having the power in his hand to change a fight. Not sure if he has the power in the left hand, but he does have something special about the right hand. He has continued to grow his profile, expand his audience, and now he's looking to get into other platforms and be successful at it with Most Valuable Promotions. First promotion coming on with Serrano and Taylor. Eddie Hearn is involved with that as well. So we got to give Jake Paul respect. Now, I'm not saying we go out there and do a line of the good stuff like Oscar De La Hoya and say that Jake Paul is one of the greatest boxers to ever do it and he's going to be one of the greatest champions and he can knock out some of the great fighters right now. That's Oscar De La Hoya just trying to put himself in position to kind of siphon some of that Jake Paul money in the Golden Boy. And I get it. We all get it, Oscar. We know what you're doing. Blind man can see what you're doing, what you're doing and what your end goal is. Not knocking you for it, but I will tell you stop. But that being said, De La Hoya put his foot in his mouth and praised Jake Paul. See, people, you can't praise Jake Paul. You can't tell Jake Paul anything good about him. You can't compliment this man. Because at the end of the day, he's all about ratings. He's a YouTuber, and that's what he does. So when De La Hoya goes out and tells Jake Paul something nice, Jake Paul's not going to sit there and say, well, thank you, sir, for the compliment. I think highly of you, too. No, Jake Paul's going to sit there and say, I know I'm the greatest. It's about time somebody else acknowledge it. And then Jake Paul's going to capitalize on that to further push his platform and keep his name buzzing and social media, because now he's calling out De La Hoya for a fight. You see how that it kind of backfired on De La Hoya because he's complimenting the guy, but it worked for him as well because now there's an opportunity for him and Jake Paul to fight in August. And I'll tell you this, Jake Paul threw out Mayweather's name, Tommy Fury, and De La Hoya. Maybe he's just throwing that out there just to, get things bubbling, knowing he has the Serrano and Taylor fight coming up, just to kind of piggyback on De La Hoya said, just to kind of take that up another notch, keep people talking about Jake Paul, De La Hoya. Or maybe he is seriously thinking about getting in there with De La Hoya, who we all know De La Hoya was a killer. But I'll be honest, if he's looking to fight De La Hoya, I hope he's not counting on De La Hoya to be this kind of ex-drug addict, superstar athlete. De La Hoya is still a beast. And De La Hoya has something in that right and left hand, but that left hand, I wouldn't even shake left hand. I wouldn't even shake hands with De La Hoya if he had me his left hand. That's like he'll short circuit you with that. Like a prank, you grab a doorknob and it shocks you. Like this, De La Hoya has like a pranky left hand. He hits you with that shit, you're gonna go into shock. So if Jake Paul's looking to fight him, he's gonna have to figure something out because he can't get in there with De La Hoya. De La Hoya is not Tyron Woodley. De La Hoya is not Ben Askren. He's not the basketball player, and he's definitely not KSI's brother. So you gotta figure this out. Pick the right opponent. So I think between Tommy Fury, De La Hoya, and Mayweather's not gonna fight him. He will for money, but Mayweather's not gonna waste his time on him. Mayweather has a fight coming up here in a couple weeks, a couple months. He's not fighting him. Mayweather's looking to maybe fight again later this year, but he's not looking to get in there with Jake Paul. especially in a real boxing match. what's his name, De La Hoya may do it. But the optimal opponent would be Tommy Fury. Tommy Fury has a fight coming up on his brother's undercard. If he wins, that's the fight that he needs to. That's the fight that he needs to do. He needs to fight that. That's my son hitting the door. Getting his little tail. But that's what Tommy Fury needs to do. Jake Paul and Tommy Fury, they need to fight. But him going after Mayweather, I just don't think Mayweather's going to do it because Jake Paul's not going to be a respectable opponent. Jake Paul is going to look to knock Mayweather out. And that's not what Mayweather wants in an exhibition. He's going to be in a straight-up fight. And Jake Paul's going to look to hit him and knock him out. And that's what we don't want to see happen to De La Hoya. To Mayweather. It's not going to be a tickling contest like he may think. It's not going to be cute. But then Mayweather, he's probably the greatest boxer that ever lived. Not just because of his undefeated record. You got to look at how many champions he beat. And just defensively, just a wizard. But does he still have it at this age? And I'm not sure. But I don't think he should go in with Jake Paul because Jake Paul, I think, is just going to really try to make an example out of him because Jake Paul doesn't really have respect for people the way he should. He's going to look to get in there and try to, knock out Floyd or hurt him. And Floyd's going to find himself in what he doesn't want to do, which is to be in a straight-up fight. That's not what he's looking to do. He's looking to have fun and do exhibitions. But Tommy Fury is the one Jake Paul needs to fight because Tommy Fury is looking for a fight. Tommy Fury wants to fight. And that's what Jake Paul should get busy with. But the thing about all those guys I just mentioned, Mayweather has power in his hands, but his hands aren't the same. Hasn't been that way for years. Tommy Fury hasn't proven to be a knockout artist. Probably packs a nice punch. He's not a knockout artist. De La Hoya had the big left hand. Not sure what he can do at this age, but that power doesn't leave. But for all these boxers, all these professional boxers, some guys have speed, some guys have defense. Then you got that concentric few that have that power to defuse you. And I just gotta keep it real, man. Jake Paul has that power. You can say what you want about him. Yeah, he's a little bit weird and stuff like that. But he has the power to knock people out cold. And you can't teach that. You just can't teach that. So going forward, we're gonna see what Jake Paul decides to do. But it's like, what's that guy's name who was fighting with Mayweather Promotions, man? Jalen Love. The white boy can fight. He can fight. But talking about he's gonna go and win a belt and stuff like that, I just don't see it happening. Him getting in there with somebody, he just doesn't have the defense or a structured enough offense to really get in there with I would say even a so-so boxer, not the elite, but someone who's just kind of unqualified type of professional with a lackluster record. I just don't think Jake Paul can get in there and handle someone like that. And I would compare Jake Paul to like Deontay Wilder's brother. Got some power, he's athletic. But, he wasn't fighting, nobodies. He actually got in there with these guys with these, poor records who probably will never go on and gain any notoriety in the sport, but they had some skill. I think once Jake Paul gets in there with someone like that, with some skill, even though they may be like 3 wins, 14 losses, I think Jake Paul loses. And I think Jake Paul loses by knockout. But the bottom line is, can he scrap? He can scrap. Is he a boxer? Yeah, he's boxing, so he's a boxer, but I just don't think he's polished enough for me to really say he's someone who's going to go on a run. Now, to be fair, we got to say that most boxers, when they start off, they don't just go out there fighting killers the first couple fights. They let them get their feet wet, kind of warm up a little bit to the crowd, to the boxing sport, the sport of boxing. And eventually, after about, fourth or fifth fight, depending on the type of fighter they are, they may move them a little bit faster, or they just keep slowly leaking them up into around the 13, 14, 15 fight. They're getting ranked, a lot of visibility, eyes on them, and then you look at them go up against another up-and-coming, top-ranked prospect. But not everybody is Lomachenko. Not everybody is a Tank Davis. Not everybody is some of these fighters who come out there and after the 10th, 11th, 12th fight, they're fighting for titles and stuff like that. Teofimo Lopez. But Anthony Joshua is another one. But with Jake Paul, we're gonna see what happens with him. He's been off for a while. He says this is his passion. I think he's gonna return. Right now, I just think he's just throwing names out there, which is what he's supposed to do. He's smart. He kind of understands the business. But I think the optimal choice from a fighting standpoint and a business standpoint is for him to fight Tommy Fury, especially if Tommy Fury looks good. What better opponent? Because you know Tyson Fury's going to have stuff to say. You know Peter Fury, Big John Fury, you know, all of the UK is going to be involved because they love the Furies. And in England, they love their boxers. They may not agree with everything Fury said in the past, but they're not going to get behind Jake Paul before they get behind Tyson Fury. Like that patriotism and loyalty to their fighters is on another level. So I think the best fight for him to make, fight Tommy Fury and go fight him in the UK. Talk about, he's talking another thing. Jake Paul's talking about fighting in the UAE or in Saudi Arabia. See, he's not stupid. Jake Paul knows he can go somewhere and make $100 million for a boxing match. Now, how would that make all of these boxers feel, these champions feel, current ex-champions feel, when Jake Paul comes out here and he goes out there to Saudi Arabia against, say, Tommy Fury. Jake Paul makes $100 million, Tommy Fury makes $20 million. Because the people are going to follow. And it's going to be an event. Because it's platform. You know what? They shouldn't hate him. I can understand if they get frustrated. They shouldn't hate him. That's what he's supposed to do. But if anything, learn from that guy and build up your profile. You know who's always talking about building up profiles? It's Eddie Hearn, man. Eddie Hearn knows what he's doing. Like him or not, he knows what he's doing. He takes fighters, and if they're not the type of fighters that deserve big money, his goal is to build their profile, get them out in front of the camera, get the world to know them, raise their profile, and then they can start commanding handsome paydays. And he feels that, and Eddie Hearn has spoken on this, and people don't like what he's saying, it's a fact. And in the US, some of these promoters don't know how to do that. And I'm going to tell you the advantage that I think Eddie Hearn has over all these promoters. You see, Eddie Hearn he knows how to market an African fighter, a fighter from the Caribbean, a fighter from Europe, a fighter from Asia, a fighter from North America, South America. Eddie Hearn knows how to market all races, everybody, no matter what part of the world you're from, your ethnic origin, your religion, doesn't matter. Eddie Hearn knows how to do it. And I think that has a lot to do with, being from England, being exposed to so many cultures. You're not uncomfortable. You may not really see everyone as different, because if you grow up and you get exposed to all this and all your little buddies and stuff growing up, and it's not uncharted territory for him. So it's nothing for him to want to go out to China, go to Saudi Arabia, go to the UAE, or go to wherever he wants to go, United States. Hey man, it's not a big deal. And that gives him an advantage because he can relate to these guys. When you grow up and you're not just kind of pigeonholing yourself to just pretty much be around people who look and think like you. And I think that hurts a lot of people in general, but also when you get in the business into promoting. Bob Arum even said it himself, he didn't know how to market Mayweather. Because Bob Arum obviously is not in touch with the hood. And as a result, he didn't treat Mayweather properly. Bob Arum is not really in touch with the barrio. Because De La Hoya, yeah, he was very marketable, but I don't think Bob Arum was able to capitalize on De La Hoya the way he could have. And if he was, he definitely was taking that money and not taking majority of that money and screwing De La Hoya. When De La went off on his own, he really started to make the real money. But Mayweather is the one who took it all the way. So when you look at Eddie Hearn and what he's done, as a promoter, he's the guy who can come in and really help with Jake Paul and help to push fighters and fighters' profiles. And I just said a whole bunch of shit and I don't even remember the point I was at. But nevertheless, back on what I was saying about Jake Paul, about Eddie Hearn, about promoters, and Jake Paul going to fight in the UAE. That's what I was talking about. You know, Jake Paul's smart for paying attention to what Eddie Hearn is doing. Getting over to the UAE, making that money. He's smart. He's paying attention. And he has a profile and the social media presence. That's what I was talking about, the social media presence. See, I'm back on track. Eddie Hearn's smart because he'll build up his fighters' profiles. So what these other fighters need to do is look at what Jake Paul has done with himself before entering boxing and continues to do while being a professional boxer now, and what Eddie Hearn tries to do with his boxers who can't command handsome paydays. He tries to build a profile. And in the States, they just can't do it. These guys still can't figure it out. Because again, like I was saying, they pigeonhole themselves. So it's a lot. Jake Paul is obviously a student of the game. He just sits back, observes. He talks a lot of nonsense. So he's a tool in that aspect. But he's very observant, and he's willing to shut up and listen when it's the most important time and learn business and understand. So we'll see just how successful he's going to be as a businessman and as a promoter. But what we do know right now is he's throwing out 3 names: De La Hoya, Tommy Fury, and Mayweather. Can't see Mayweather, even though he's about money. Just can't see it. De La Hoya, I think he would jump at it because I think he needs that to keep his business going. I just think Ryan Garcia isn't doing it for him. And then Tommy Fury, I think, is really the best choice for Jake Paul because England's the place to have that fight. But if not, the UAE, and that's one of the places Jake Paul has talked about, and they're going to get paid. But if he does fight Tommy Fury, I'll tell you this: Tommy Fury has a high chance of Tommy Fury losing that fight because his defense isn't that great, and Jake Paul, all he seems to focus on is jab, move, timing, and then just waiting for you to just get in the line of fire. And he's letting that right hand go. And if he catches him with that right hand, you know, he's out of there. Jake Paul has the ability to knock you out. I just don't think. I think Jake Paul's defense is getting out of the way of shots, like using his legs, but he can get hit too. But I don't think, if you're talking about who has the biggest bang and that right hand, I think it's Jake Paul for sure. And I'd actually go ahead and say I think Jake Paul will beat Tommy Fury. I'm just being honest with you. We'll see how Tommy Fury looks in his next fight. I just think Jake Paul, he just doesn't have any respect when he gets in that ring, which is a good thing for him because when you're trying to hold him or you think you're going to break cleanly, Jake Paul's going to fire. And he's going to let that shot go and he's going to hurt you. And the referee, 9 times out of 10, they don't duck a point. They start counting. And it's a fight. So I think for Tommy Fury, he has to be really prepared fighting Jake Paul, more so than Jake Paul for him. Because Jake Paul's not going to show him any respect, and he's going to, and any opportunity he gets to let that shot go, he's going to hit him, and he may even rough him up a little bit. Because Tommy Fury looks, you know, as far as aesthetically, looks really good, looks strong. But obviously there's something there in Jake Paul's hands that those muscles and stuff can't help Tommy Fury to brace himself for when it comes to the power of Jake Paul. That being said, like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Shout out to all the veterans, and as always, I'm in the breeze.